Ms. Marlette, step away from the station. We need to talk about the money being taken out of your residence accounts, the withdrawals tied to your shift dates.
I know how this looks. I do need you to understand these people have nobody. I was the only...
For 6 years, people trusted Tessa Marlowe with the most vulnerable members of their families. Every single one of them was wrong too.
The notebook from your car, Tessa, 11 names, account numbers, pins, all in your handwriting.
She would not get the chance to explain. Within 48 hours, state investigators would seize her phone, her laptop, and a spiral notebook from the glove box of her 2018 Subaru. 11 names, 11 account numbers, 11 pins, all in her own handwriting. 4 years, roughly $1.2 million. 11 residents of Maple Crest Care Home, most of them with advanced dementia, several of them already dead by the time investigators understood what had been done to them. The woman who remembered their birthdays had been keeping a different kind of record the entire time. Before we go any further, I have to ask, have you ever trusted someone with the care of a parent or a grandparent? Someone you could not be there to watch over yourself? Drop a comment and tell me how you decided that person was safe. And if you are not subscribed yet, fix that now. We cover cases like this every single week, and these stories deserve more eyes on them. Tessa Marlowe was born in 1986 in Halford, Pennsylvania, a borough of roughly 9,000 people tucked into the rolling farmland between York and Lancaster. Her father, Daniel Marlowe, drove a delivery route for a regional bakery and worked the same 6 days a week for 19 years. Her mother, Joyce Marlowe, was a part-time receptionist at a chiropractor's office on Market Street. The family lived in a 2-bedroom rancher on Linden Avenue. Money was thin, but never absent. Joyce later told a local reporter that Tessa was the kind of child who set her own alarm clock at age 7 and brought breakfast in bed to her grandmother on Sunday mornings. That grandmother, May Latimer, lived in the back bedroom of the Marlowe home from the time Tessa was 9 until she died from complications of Alzheimer's in the summer of 2003. Tessa was 16. Joyce told investigators years later that Tessa had been the one who fed May, who walked her down the hallway when she wandered at night, who learned to redirect her gently when she asked about people who had been dead for decades. Neighbors remembered Tessa pushing her grandmother in a wheelchair around the block on summer evenings. The teachers at Halford Area High School wrote in her senior yearbook profile that she planned to become a nurse and that nobody who knew her was surprised. She enrolled at Harrisburg Area Community College in the fall of 2004 and completed her associate degree in nursing in May of 2007. Her clinical evaluations from that period describe her as calm under pressure, unusually patient with geriatric patients, and a natural fit for long-term care. One instructor wrote that Tessa had the bedside manner of someone twice her age. She passed the NCLEX RN on her first attempt in July of 2007 and took her first job that September at a subacute rehabilitation unit in Lancaster County. Her starting salary was $42,000. For the next 11 years, she moved through a series of nursing positions across the central Pennsylvania corridor, a hospice in Mechanicsburg, a memory care wing in York. A short stint at a hospital step-down unit she left because the pace, she told a friend, made it impossible to actually know the patients. Every employer described the same person, reliable, soft-spoken, willing to take the holidays nobody else wanted, the kind of nurse who stayed an extra 40 minutes off the clock to finish a conversation with a family. In April of 2018, Tessa Marlowe accepted a position as a night shift charge nurse at Maple Crest Care Home, a 90-bed assisted living facility on the south end of Halford. The hire was, by every account, a coup for the facility. Maple Crest had cycled through 3 night supervisors in the previous 18 months. Tessa came with 11 years of geriatric experience, a clean license, and references that read like quiet love letters. The director of nursing, a woman named Carla Brennan, later testified that she had felt, on the day she signed the offer, that the home had finally gotten lucky. Tessa was 32 years old. She lived alone in a 1-bedroom rental on Pine Street, a 15-minute drive from the facility. She had a rescue beagle named Walter and a standing Wednesday breakfast at a diner called Patty's with another nurse she had worked with in York. She drove a used Subaru Outback she had bought outright with 8 years of saved overtime. Her credit score was 814. She had no debt aside from a small remaining balance on her nursing school loans, which she paid on the first of every month. She was, in every documentable sense, exactly the person Maple Crest believed it had hired. The families of the residents she would later be convicted of robbing wrote her thank you notes during this period. One of them, from the daughter of an early victim, was entered into evidence at trial. It read, in part, "You are the reason I sleep at night. Knowing my mother has you on her hardest days is the only thing that gets me through the week." The note was dated October of 2019. By that month, Tessa Marlowe had already forged the woman's mother's signature on at least 4 separate withdrawal slips. Maple Crest Care Home occupied a converted hotel on the south end of Halford Borough, 3 stories of beige brick set back from Cumberland Street behind a half-circle of crabapple trees. It held a state license for 90 beds across 3 wings, color-coded green, blue, and amber, with the amber wing reserved for residents with moderate to advanced cognitive impairment. The facility ran on 3 shifts. Day shift had 23 staff members on the floor at peak hours. Evening shift dropped to 14. The night shift, which ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., had 4. 4 people for 90 residents, 1 charge nurse, 1 licensed practical nurse, 2 certified nursing assistants. The charge nurse, by facility policy, held the keys to the medication card, the narcotics log, the resident files, and a small office at the end of the green wing where the in-house resident trust ledger was kept. The ledger was a holdover system from the facility's previous ownership, a binder and a linked checking account used to hold pocket money for residents who could no longer drive themselves to a bank. Birthday cash from grandchildren went into the ledger. Social Security overflow went into the ledger. When a resident needed $40 for a hairdresser visit or a new pair of slippers from the gift shop downstairs, a staff member would write a withdrawal slip and pull the cash from a small safe in the office. The ledger was reconciled monthly by an outside bookkeeper who came in on the second Tuesday. The bookkeeper compared the binder against the account statement. She did not compare either of them against the residents themselves. The residents, in most cases, would not have remembered if she had. 90 residents. 31 of them had no listed emergency contact within a 50-mile radius. 19 of them had no listed contact at all. 42 of them had been diagnosed with some form of dementia, ranging from mild cognitive impairment to late-stage Alzheimer's. The intake files for every resident, kept in a locked cabinet in the charge nurse's office, included the resident's date of birth, social security number, banking information for any direct deposits, copies of pension award letters, and in many cases the resident's previous bank PIN, written down by an admitting family member during the rush of move-in and never removed. The overnight shift was, by design, the quietest in the building. Lights down by 10, bed checks at midnight, 2 and 4. The CNAs handled changes and repositioning. The LPN ran the floor. The charge nurse, between calls, sat at the station. She had the keys. She had the files. She had, for 8 hours every night she worked, the entire 90-bed building almost entirely to herself. This was the trust the residents extended. This was the trust their families extended. This was the trust the state license assumed. No one noticed. No one checked. The first withdrawal came on August 19, 2019, a Monday night, 16 months into Tessa Marlowe's tenure at Maple Crest. The victim was a 79-year-old woman named Eleanor Pritchard, a retired schoolteacher with moderate Alzheimer's, whose only living relative was a sister in Arizona, who called the facility once a month. The withdrawal was for $400, drawn from Eleanor's personal checking account at the First National Bank of Halford, via a paper slip submitted at the drive-through window of the branch on Cumberland Street. The signature on the slip was a careful imitation of Eleanor's own, copied from a signature card kept in her intake file. The teller did not ask questions. The handwriting was close enough, and Eleanor Pritchard was a known customer of 40 years. Nothing happened. No call from the bank. No flag from Eleanor's sister, who reviewed the statements quarterly and assumed the withdrawal was for an aid or a delivery. No alert from the facility, because the facility did not see the personal accounts. Tessa Marlowe waited 11 days and then went back. $600 on August 30th, $300 on September 6th, $500 on September 14th. By October, she had moved on to a second resident, then a third. By the end of 2019, she had begun stealing from 5 different people. The pattern was clinical and patient. She kept individual withdrawals small enough to look like ordinary spending. 400, 600, sometimes 800. Never the same amount twice in a row. Never on the same day of the week. Always within the established habits of the victim's life. A resident who had historically withdrawn cash on the 3rd of the month would see a new withdrawal on the 3rd of the month, plus one more on the 17th. In February of 2020, she escalated. A 73-year-old retired postal worker named Howard Levitt in the Amber Wing, advanced Parkinson's complicated by dementia, no living family. Tessa logged into Howard's online banking from her home IP using credentials assembled from his intake file. She changed the mailing address on the account to a post office box she had rented in nearby New Cumberland. She redirected his pension deposits, $2,300 a month, into a routing change that funneled them through a transfer service before depositing into an account opened in his name, but linked to a debit card mailed to her P.O. box. Howard would never see a statement again. Howard could not have read one if he had. She escalated again in the summer of 2020. A second debit card. A third. By the end of that year, she was stealing from 8 different residents across both the Green and Amber Wings. The total for 2020 alone was approximately $290,000. She did not spend it the way amateurs spend stolen money. She did not buy a boat. She did not buy a new car. She did not upgrade her apartment. She kept the rescue beagle. She kept the Subaru. She kept Wednesday breakfast at Patty's. What she did was move money, some of it into a brokerage account she opened in 2020 under her own name, some of it into a savings account at a credit union 3 counties away, some of it, the bulk of it, into a series of certificates of deposit she planned to roll into a quiet retirement. She was 34 years old, in a profession that often broke people by 50, and she was building, in slow, patient layers, a financial future that did not depend on the body that had so far carried her. The missed signs, in retrospect, formed a long, quiet list. Eleanor Pritchard's monthly statements stopped arriving at her room and began arriving at a new mailbox. Howard Levitt's pension never bounced into his trust ledger the way the bookkeeper expected, but the bookkeeper had no mechanism to chase it. A resident named Frances Doyle began complaining, in the disordered way of late dementia, that her purse was empty when she knew it should not be. 2 CNAs reported the complaint to their charge nurse. The charge nurse documented the complaint and noted in the chart that the resident appeared confused. The chart entry was true. The chart entry was also a lie of omission so total it functioned as a confession. By mid-2022, Tessa Marlowe was stealing from 11 residents simultaneously. The total for that year crossed $400,000. She was, by then, 3 years into the scheme. She had not been audited. She had not been suspected. She had been nominated, in March of that year, for the facility's Caregiver of the Year award. She did not win, but she was a finalist. The certificate hung in the break room for the rest of the year. We are about to get into how this finally unraveled. Before we do, if this case is making you angry, drop a comment for the residents of Maple Crest. Most of them never knew what happened to them. Subscribe if you have not yet. Cases like this do not get the attention they deserve, and this channel does not look away. The end of it began in March of 2023, 4 months after Eleanor Pritchard died. Eleanor had passed in November of 2022, 82 years old, in her bed in the Green Wing of Maple Crest at 4:20 in the morning on a Tuesday. Tessa Marlowe had been on shift. Tessa, by the account of the CNA who was with her, had held Eleanor's hand for the last 40 minutes. The CNA later said that she had cried watching it. The CNA had not known what to do with that memory after the rest came out. Eleanor's sister in Arizona was elderly herself and did not travel for the funeral. The estate, such as it was, fell to Eleanor's niece, a woman named Margaret Pritchard Hale, 46 years old, a paralegal at a small firm in Pittsburgh. Margaret had visited her aunt only twice in the last decade. She had felt guilty about that for years and had told herself she would handle the paperwork carefully when the time came, as a kind of late apology. In early March of 2023, Margaret sat down at her kitchen table with the box of statements forwarded from the facility and began to reconcile her aunt's accounts. She was thorough. She was a paralegal. She knew how to read a bank record. What she found, on the third evening of that work, was that pension deposits had continued to flow into a checking account in Eleanor's name for 3 full months after Eleanor's death. She found that those deposits had been withdrawn, in cash, in small increments, at branches around Cumberland County. She found, going backward through the prior 2 years, a pattern of withdrawals that did not match anything Eleanor could possibly have spent money on. Eleanor had been bedridden, on a feeding tube, in a memory care wing, for the last 18 months of her life. Margaret called Maple Crest the next morning. The administrator, a man named Greg Schaefer, told her he would look into it personally. He did not. He passed the complaint to the director of nursing, Carla Brennan, who began an internal review and got, within 48 hours, a sense that something was very wrong. Margaret Pritchard Hale, while she waited, did the thing that ended Tessa Marlowe's career. She called the Pennsylvania Department of Aging, the Office of Elder Justice in the State Attorney General's office, and the Halford Borough Police Department, all on the same Monday, all with the same documents attached. She did not wait for Maple Crest to handle it internally. She had a paralegal's instinct for what happens when you let an institution investigate itself. Within 2 weeks, a forensic accountant named David Yee had been assigned to the case out of the State Attorney General's Elder Financial Exploitation Unit. Within 3 weeks, Maple Crest had received a preservation letter. Within 4, Tessa Marlowe had been placed on administrative leave pending review, told only that there was a billing irregularity question concerning a former resident. She did not run. She did not destroy the notebook. She kept going to the diner on Wednesdays. She kept walking Walter at 6 p.m. She told a friend, over coffee, that she was sure it would all be sorted out. She did not appear, on the surface, to understand what was coming. David Yee spent the next 5 months building the case. He began with Eleanor Pritchard's account. He pulled every statement from First National Bank of Halford, going back to 2018. He pulled the signature card. He pulled the surveillance footage from every drive-through and lobby teller window where a withdrawal had been made. He matched the dates of the withdrawals against the shift records at Maple Crest Care Home. The correlation was, in his later courtroom testimony, a single horizontal line. Every withdrawal had occurred on a date Tessa Marlowe had worked the overnight shift, or in the 24 hours that followed. He expanded the review. He sent preservation letters to every bank in Cumberland, York, Dauphin, and Lancaster counties. He cross-referenced the depositors against the Maple Crest resident roster. He found 11 matches, 11 residents whose accounts showed identical patterns: small withdrawals, forged signatures, redirected pensions, linked debit cards mailed to a single P.O. box in New Cumberland that was registered when he finally subpoenaed the Postal Service in the name of Tessa M. Marlowe. The forged signatures themselves became their own line of evidence. Yee retained a forensic document examiner from Philadelphia, a woman named Dr. Iris Halberg, who compared 431 question signatures against verified exemplars from each of the 11 victims. Her conclusion, delivered in a 46-page report, was that every one of the question signatures was a forgery, and that every one of the forgeries had been executed by the same hand. She could not, by professional standard, identify that hand by name. She could say only that one person had written all 431 of them. The digital evidence followed. The IP records from the online transfers tied every login to a residential modem registered to Tessa Marlowe's address on Pine Street. The mobile banking sessions geolocated to her phone. The debit card transactions clustered around her commute. Yi was building, by July of 2023, a case so structurally complete that the question was no longer whether she had done it, but how he would present the scale of it to a jury without losing them in the numbers. The answer to that question arrived in his office on August 14, 2023, in the form of a clear evidence bag from the Halford Borough Police Department. 3 days earlier, a patrol officer named Sergeant Eli Ortega had pulled Tessa Marlowe over for a registration violation on Route 11. The stop was unrelated. The state attorney general had not yet authorized an arrest. Ortega ran her information, found nothing of concern beyond the expired registration, and asked, as he prepared to write her a citation, whether she would consent to a quick look in the vehicle. She said yes. She had nothing to hide. In the glove box, in plain view, the moment Ortega opened it, was a spiral-bound notebook, the kind sold for 99 cents at a drugstore. Inside the notebook, in neat columns in blue pen, were the names of 11 Maple Crest residents. Beside each name was an account number, a routing number, and a 4-digit PIN. Beside several of the names were notations in a personal shorthand: dates of last withdrawal, current balance, scheduled deposit dates, and in 2 cases, the word deceased with a small date beside it. Ortega read the first page. He closed the notebook. He told Tessa Marlowe to stay in the vehicle. He called his sergeant. The sergeant called the state attorney general's office. The state attorney general's office called David Yi. This was the smoking gun, a private ledger in her own handwriting of the 11 people she was paid to protect. The arrest came on the morning of August 28, 2023, at 7:11 a.m. At the front door of the rental on Pine Street. 2 agents from the state attorney general's office, 1 officer from Halford Borough, and a single state trooper. They had a warrant for her arrest and a separate warrant to search the residence. Tessa Marlowe answered the door in gray sweatpants and a faded Penn State t-shirt. Walter, the beagle, stood behind her at her ankles. The lead agent, a woman named Lieutenant Maya Klein, did not raise her voice. Klein: Tessa Marlowe? Marlowe: Yes, Klein. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges related to elder financial exploitation, identity theft, forgery, and theft by deception. We also have a warrant to search the residence. Step outside, please. Keep your hands where I can see them. Marlowe did not move for several seconds. Klein later testified that she watched the recognition arrive on Marlowe's face in stages. The first stage was confusion. The second was a kind of fast, internal calculation. The third was something quieter, a settling, as if a long-running anxiety had finally landed. Marlowe: Can I put the dog inside? Klein: I will have an officer secure the animal. Step outside. Marlowe: He is not going to bite you. Klein: Ma'am, step outside. She stepped outside. She was cuffed on the small concrete porch in front of the rosebush her landlord had planted the year she moved in. A neighbor across the street, retrieving a newspaper, watched the entire thing in a bathrobe and did not move for 2 full minutes after the vehicles pulled away. In the car, on the way to processing, Klein read her rights. Marlowe acknowledged that she understood. Klein then asked neutrally whether she wanted to make a statement. Marlowe was silent for a long time. Then she said, looking straight ahead through the windshield, "I want a lawyer." Those were the last words she spoke on the record outside of court. She did not, in the 14 months between arrest and verdict, give an interview. She did not allocute. She did not write a letter to any victim's family. The notebook, the bank records, the IP logs, the signature analysis, and the shift schedule did all of the talking. The Cumberland County Grand Jury returned an indictment on November 9, 2023. The charges were severe and specific. 11 counts of elder financial exploitation under Pennsylvania, Title 18, Section 3922. 1. 11 counts of identity theft under Section 4120. 47 counts of forgery under Section 4101. a single overarching count of theft by deception, charged as a felony of the first degree because the aggregate value exceeded $100,000. Her attorney, a defense lawyer out of Harrisburg named Philip Guerra, filed an early motion to suppress the notebook on the grounds that consent to search the vehicle had been ambiguous. The motion was denied by Judge Helena Marsh on March 4, 2024, in a 10-page ruling that cited the officer's body cam audio of the consent exchange and the doctrine of plain view. Trial began on September 30, 2024, in the Cumberland County Court of Common Pleas. The prosecution called 31 witnesses over 9 days. David Yee walked the jury through the financial reconstruction for parts of 2 days. Dr. Iris Hallberg, the document examiner, testified for a full afternoon. Lieutenant Maya Klein testified about the arrest and the notebook. 3 surviving victims, or rather their guardians and powers of attorney, gave testimony on behalf of residents who could no longer testify themselves. The most damaging testimony came from Margaret Pritchard Hale, the niece who had started the entire collapse. She read into the record her Aunt Eleanor's last sentence, as captured in the facility's progress notes, 2 days before her death. "Tell Tessa, thank you for the flowers." She paused for 19 seconds after she finished reading it, according to the trial transcript. The courtroom paused with her. Defense called 4 witnesses, including a forensic accountant who attempted to challenge the IP attribution. The challenge did not survive cross-examination. The defense did not put Tessa Marlowe on the stand. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and 20 minutes. They returned guilty verdicts on every count, all 70 of them, on October 17, 2024. Sentencing followed on December 12th. Judge Marsh sentenced Tessa Marlowe to a term of 8 to 16 years in state prison, ordered restitution of $1,217,400 to the victims and their estates, and entered a permanent injunction barring her from holding any nursing license or working in any capacity in elder care anywhere in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. From the bench, before pronouncing sentence, Judge Marsh addressed her directly. "You did not target strangers. You did not target the wealthy. You targeted the people you tucked into bed at night. You chose them by your own ledger, because no one was watching them. The greater theft in this case is not the money. The money can be returned, at least in part. The greater theft is the warmth you offered as the instrument of the harm. The kindness that drew these families to trust you was by your design, the weapon. I do not believe you do not understand what you have done. I believe you understood it precisely, and I believe you continued." Tessa Marlowe was remanded that afternoon to SCI Muncie, the state's primary correctional facility for women in Lycoming County, where she will be eligible for parole consideration no earlier than 2032. She is, as of this recording, 40 years old. She will be at minimum 48 on her earliest possible release date. Her nursing license has been permanently revoked. Walter, the rescue beagle, was placed with a former co-worker who had agreed, in the days after the arrest, to take him. Maple Crest Care Home settled civil claims with each of the 11 victims' families in the spring of 2025 for an undisclosed combined amount believed to be in the low 7 figures. The director of nursing resigned. The administrator was terminated. The State Department of Health imposed corrective action requirements on the facility's overnight oversight protocols. The resident trust ledger, the old binder system that had run unmonitored for years, was retired and replaced with a third-party reconciliation service. None of those reforms reached the residents who were already gone. This case was quiet, patient, almost invisible. But this next case on the right-hand side is even louder and even harder to look away from. Click it now.